VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. We are on July 31st, about a week and a half away from the first preseason game, and we have 1 week of training camp in the books. So I want to go through some of the developments, rank them in order. Of course, yesterday we had Danielle Hunter's contract extension for 1 year. That stole the headlines, so that's going to be on the list, you bet your ass. But we're going to go through things in case you're following camp from, just from afar, casually skimming headlines. I want to break down the 5 big developments and explain to you what they mean for Vikings football. Tomorrow, we'll have Alec Lewis on from The Athletic. He covers the Vikings. Josh Fry and I will talk to him. Maybe shoot him between 5 and 10 questions, depending on how long or how short his answers are. Wednesday, we have Dakota, she's back. And then I will be at Vikings training camp on Thursday night with my son. So I'm not sure when I'll record thereafter. But let's start off with the training camp stuff for, I guess, week 1 of training camp. The 5 emergent developments, I've ranked them in order, counting down. So when we get to 1, which I already teased, that'll be the most important development. But number 5 out of the gate is the Jordan Addison noise died down. Now, why does that matter? Well, the 21-year-old rookie made a pretty awful mistake in his, I guess it was a Lamborghini SUV. I didn't know that. I thought it was like, the kind that you salivate over, a sports car, but I think it was a SUV. He got popped for going 85 miles per hour over the speed limit. Not ideal. One of the takeaways, I think on this show we had Ron Saw, and he said, well, he wasn't drunk and he didn't hurt anybody. Yeah, that's one of the good things about it. It wasn't Henry Ruggs all over again, but it was still pretty awful for your first-round rookie to get popped something like that before he's even set foot on a field. Well, the good news is he has apologized. Apparently, he was trying to get home to his dog who was sick. I don't know if his dog texted him or how that all shook down. But in terms of prognosticating Vikings football, the good news is that shit seems to be in the rear view. Nobody was hurt. He apologized. He did a stupid thing. The head coach said we were very disappointed in that and it can never happen again. And it could have been something where if there was a grimmer situation with that infraction, he could have been in real trouble. And he got by that. And then in terms of making amends, on a very important aspect of life, especially for a guy like me who is sober for about 11 years now from alcoholism. He made it right. He came out and realized he did something stupid. He got with his peers and Egan, and hopefully somebody yanked him by the shoulder and said, you can't do that shit, man. You're in a really rare opportunity to make a lot of money, and you're going to do some stupid shit like that. Hopefully somebody got through to him. But the overall talker regarding Addison, and the only reason this is important is because he was a first rounder for the football side, is all of that hoopla and tomfoolery has seemed to die down. Hopefully for his sake, and I guess for Vikings football's sake, that's the last thing we hear about him doing evil shit, cruising through St. Paul on a Thursday morning in 140 miles per hour. No good. For the most part, though, that seems to be done. And he is in camp, and he looks the part in camp. Now, we always give the disclaimer that training camp, nobody can do any wrong. The only thing that's bad about training camp is if you're not included in the big highlight reels. Everybody looks good in camp, and Addison is no different. So we shall see if that translates to rookie on-the-field success. I would think so. I hope so. But the overall talker on Addison is that his terrible start he has apologized for, and we can move on. He wasn't suspended. Nothing crazy happened. We're good. Number 4, still on the same position spot, is Jalen Nailor. Appears to be the real deal. Nobody told him that Week 17 and Week 18 of the 2022 season were over. Nailor tabulated some garbage time stats through no fault of his own against the Packers in that rotten game and against the Bears in the mostly meaningless game. It was meaningful for the Bears because the Vikings had a hand in handing them the first overall pick, which they parlayed into a bunch of draft capital. But on Jalen Nailor, he looked pretty damn spiffy in the last 2 games of the season. Now, was it an outlier? And, garbage time, did it mean anything? Well, he's at camp, and he's stealing the headlines. He seems to have the hype of a WR2, and he's really gunning for a WR4 job. I will continue to say this for the next, August till March, 7 months, is that everything Jalen Nailor does in 2023 is important because KJ Osborne probably has one season left with the Vikings. There is a decent possibility that KJ Osborne wins the WR2 job and then chips off 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. It would be wonderful. But then that would mean that he's going to snag a large free agent contract from somebody else. Why? Because the guy I just talked about, Addison, was drafted to be the WR2. And it's severely unlikely that you're going to pay Justin Jefferson $30 to $35 million per season, have Addison on the rookie deal, who he should be a WR2, and then, by the way, we're going to toss 10 to 20 million at KJ Osborne. Probably not going to happen. So everything Osborne does this year, of course, will, contend for the postseason for the Vikings, and hopefully a Super Bowl. But he's really angling for his next big contract, which is probably not going to be for the Vikings. And bada bing, next offseason, you're going to turn to the depth chart and say, all right, we got Jefferson, Addison, who's the WR3? Boom, you have Jalen Nailor, who by that time hopefully has shown even more development to be that guy. So when you see the positivity about Nailor at this training camp in Eagan, great. It'll probably end up in a few touchdowns for him in 2023, but the broader picture is if he's good, he'll be the Vikings WR3 next year because in my prediction, Osborne is nearly guaranteed to go play elsewhere because they drafted Addison for Osborne's job. So number 4 is Nailor is the real deal, at least at camp. We shall see if it translates to the preseason and again in the regular season when, the games aren't in garbage time. Number 3, we touched on this with Josh Fry, is Jawan Williams, the cornerback from the Patriots. He was a free agent newcomer that the Vikings signed in April. And the reason that guys like me and gals that are watching the show really were like, meh, is because when you sign a dude in April, you never know if that guy's actually going to make the team, or in this case, if he's a blossoming starter. So Jawan Williams missed all of 2022 with the Patriots because of an injury. He's a former second-round draft pick. And as we analyze this depth chart to figure out who the other cornerback is going to be next to Byron Murphy, it could be Andrew Booth, it could be a Caleb Evans, it could be Mekhi Blackman, or it could be Jawan Williams. Well, the early indication is that Williams is running with the first teamers. He's huge for a cornerback. What is he, 6'3", 220, 230 or something like that? So he's got that Brian Flores build. Brian Flores likes big physical corners. And it appears, if you can trust minicamp and now training camp, that Jawan Williams, the free agent newcomer, is trending towards a very prominent role in the Vikings defense, maybe even the starting outside corner job. That's a big deal because, again, we had no idea if that guy was signed to be a camp body. He was hurt all of last year. Who knows what his prognostication is to be for the 2023 Vikings? Well, right away here in the summer, it turns out they might have bigger plans than I thought or you thought. So circle Jawan Williams as a prospective starter. Number 2 is Brian O'Neill avoided the PUP list. What's the PUP list? Physically unable to perform. This man, in that same game that I talked about with Nailor, having a little breakout against the Packers, Brian O'Neill, as you recall, partially tore his Achilles. It prompted the Vikings to be without O'Neill in the postseason, and the Vikings lost in the first round of the postseason. Well, when you tear an Achilles, especially in basketball, you never know how that player is going to come back. If he's going to be the same or a running back in football, that is the kiss of death injury, is an Achilles. So when Brian O'Neill was hurt, we were like, oh, God, well, that sucks. We're not going to have him for the postseason. Now what? Well, if you fast forward to summer, he's not even on the PUP list, which is delicious news for Vikings football because there's a really good chance that he plays week 1. And I'm guessing, 90% of you watched the Netflix documentary. Kirk Cousins was constantly under siege, and we just kind of gave the offensive line a pass for it because the team was winning. Well, you're going to need Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw to bookend the offensive line if you want that continuity to translate into the Vikings being one of the better offensive lines. When a player tears his Achilles in any fashion, completely or partially, he should be walked back gingerly, and you would almost expect him to go on a PUP list like this. But somehow, maybe because the tear wasn't all that brutal and it was just that partial aspect of it, Brian O'Neill avoids the PUP list, which PUP list there for that type of reason. Guy coming back from the Achilles, work him in. And although he's not doing a bunch of, on-the-field practice items right now, I think it's a safe bet that Brian O'Neill will be ready sooner than later, which is super encouraging for the prognosis of the 2023 offense. All right, the final one, no mystery here, Danielle Hunter. We are good to go with that man, number 99. So he, 2018, He signed a pretty large deal with Rick Spielman, which was great. He deserved it. But to the detriment of him, he got really good almost the moment he signed that contract. And I guess that's probably how contracts should work. But he almost finished out that 5-year team-friendly deal scripted by Rick Spielman. And finally, with new representation, I believe, he put his foot down and says, I'm not coming to minicamp. And if I come to training camp, I'm not doing anything. But Hunter is back for 1 year and $17 million, which is expandable up to $20 million with SAC incentives. I've written about it on VikingsTerritory.com. I've said it on here that the 7 weeks of what's going to happen with Hunter was always a litmus test about the team's intentions in 2023. If they had traded Hunter after trading Zadarius Smith, you're staring at a depth chart with Marcus Davenport and DJ Wanham as your edge rushers, and that doesn't translate to a team that's serious about reaching the postseason and perhaps the Super Bowl in February. However, I guess the plan all along was to finagle some sort of deal with Hunter, partner him with Davenport, and then that actually is a duo who can wreak havoc on Sundays. So the litmus test, before anything happened, which I stipulated, was if Hunter's back, they're in it to win it. If they trade him for picks or whatever they get, we're probably on a path to a season that is a 10-7 ceiling at best. But Hunter is back, so I think that the defense can run roughshod if this Brian and Flores experiment works sooner than later. But the takeaway is that the 2023 Vikings, now with Hunter back, the best defensive player, you can get excited about them again if you weren't already. I would have stared here into this camera, into your very soul, and said, without Hunter on this 2023 team, I don't know what to expect. Well, they got him back for a year, which also, the one-year nature of the deal sets up an interesting, not necessarily a standoff, but a predicament. In February and March next year, you're going to look down at the depth chart, and you're going to see, our best pass rushers are Patrick Jones and Luigi Villan. Under contract next year, the Vikings' edge rushing room is next to nil. And probably setting up the time finally to draft an edge rusher in round 1 or round 2. The Vikings haven't done that since 2005 with Erasmus James. So unless they have a fabulous year and Davenport plus Hunter want to return, this team is barren of edge rushers beyond this season. But the overall takeaway on Hunter is he's ready to go for 2023, which means you can renew your enthusiasm about this team, in my opinion, being a playoff contender. So, from bottom to top, Jordan Addison, that hoopla is mostly done. Unless something else springs up, stupid infraction that he has already begun to recover from, at least in the court of public opinion. Jalen Naylor, unsurprisingly to me, is the real deal. Jawan Williams could be on his way to a starting cornerback's job. There is no PUP list for Brian O'Neill. And after 7 weeks of suspense, I think on June 8th or June 9th is when Ian Rappaport tweet said that teams were calling about Danielle Hunter, and the trade sweepstakes felt real. 7 weeks later, he's back with the Vikings at least for one more season. All right, tomorrow morning, for your purposes, it'll probably publish around 11 a.m. Central Time. We'll talk to Alec Lewis from The Athletic and pick his brain about these Vikings. Skol, baby.